Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 168 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I am one of your co-hosts, Billy Bob, and I have my other two co-hosts, Ian Cummer, streaming live from Moscow, Carlo Parcelli, streaming live from Washington, D.C., and our special guest today is Leo Zhao, streaming live from East Berlin. So we have entitled today's program, Regime Change Dynamite. That is just in reference to the Nobel Peace Prize Committee giving the Nobel Peace Prize to the opposition, the imperialist puppet opposition in Venezuela. What's her name? Corina Machado received the Peace Prize. And immediately she said, Trump really deserved this, but I will accept it. And, they are really hoping to, get the imperialist hands on Venezuela's resources and get Maduro out of the picture. So I was reading Telegram this morning, and to that end, they were sharing part of a Politico article. So Politico said that Trump plans to oust Maduro with an anti-Maduro campaign without officially labeling it regime change. The word regime change now has another meaning for the world public. So regime change has a negative connotation. So Trump wants to do a regime change, but he doesn't want to use those terms. So Trump has a different plan to oust Maduro this time around. Sticking to an anti-Maduro campaign without officially labeling it regime change has other benefits for the U.S. Trump would look weak if he loudly proclaimed he was trying to oust Maduro, but it doesn't end up working. And the U.S. would also be less responsible for the potential costly fallout in Venezuela if it avoids an all-out invasion and sticks to what it insists is a law enforcement mission. So we're not regime changing, guys. It's just law enforcement. I hope you understand that. Like what the U.S. is doing is just and it's righteous. We're enforcing laws. This isn't a regime change resource grab. Right, Carlo?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. 100%, Billy Bob.
Quick question.
There's no oil in Venezuela.
Yeah, just a quick question. Does this have to do with the Nobel Peace Prize? Does this have to do with is this the reason for the closing of the Dutch embassy in Venezuela?
I have not heard of the Dutch embassy closing in Venezuela. The only thing I heard about the Dutch is how they grabbed that one Chinese
chips making factory.
But that's interesting. The Dutch is like they're just leaping at every chance to align themselves with the imperialists and their aggression.
It's weird that one of the first ones.
Well, so the Dutch do have, I guess, an island or two. They do have some. I didn't even know that until I looked them up a few days ago. I did not hear about the embassy closing, but I do know that
Norway.
They have Norway.
Yeah, Venezuela closes embassy in Oslo.
Oh, okay. Well, so the Dutch do have some island holdings in the Caribbean, and I saw on a Telegram feed a few days ago that their Navy in the Caribbean is on high alert because of Venezuela. So if this escalates to military action, I would imagine it would probably be the U.S., of course, probably the British, maybe the Danish, and most likely it's looking like the Dutch will have a hand in it. Because I did, and actually that's funny because it's like keeping track of what colonies they still have, because they don't really advertise it anymore. But as it turns out, the Denmark has Greenland. I don't know how many people even knew Denmark had Greenland until Trump started talking about Greenland. I guess I always kind of knew that, but you don't really just think about, well, who still has colonies, especially on the other side of the world. So as it turns out, some of them do. Dutch do, and French do.
I've been to what is the name of the Dutch island? That's that one lady went missing there, right? A long time ago in the 90s. That was the big story. There was like a U.S. teenager went there on vacation and died, and then they were blaming Joran van der Sloot. I haven't heard that name for a while, but you guys are too young. Look at Ian's face; he's way too young.
No, I don't.
I remember it, but I don't remember the details.
Yeah, was that Aruba? I mean, it might have been Aruba.
Might have been Aruba, yeah.
And then Curacao. I'm not sure if Curacao. I think that might be also a Dutch owned island over there. But yeah, I mean, I would imagine the United States would be, 95% of the military there. I mean, there might be, whatever assets, the Dutch have and the British have, they might, be in the area supporting. But we're going to find out exactly what the plan is. I mean, ostensibly they're going to say that Maduro is the head drug trafficker and we've got to take him out. I can't imagine what else they would do, but from reading things, I mean, it seems like they would like to do what they did in Syria, where they would occupy the oil fields, occupy the gold mines, and then even if the regime didn't collapse, they would keep them from having access to these resources, and then they could just revisit 10 years later with another effort to regime change. Who knows? Like I don't know if that's possible. If the Maduro military would be unable to control its own important oil resources like Syria was unable to do. But I mean, we're going to see. I'm just speculating about what in the hell the U.S. could possibly do. I mean, is it just going to be a decapitation strike? Are they just going to lock 70 bunker busters at the Mia Flores Palace? I mean, we're gonna find out.
It's
a quick, not aside, but something in addition. A friend of mine, Keith O'Brien, made a illuminating post this week about something that I hadn't thought about before. Why the Scandinavian countries are rich. A big part of it is because the money they make, a lot of it is state-owned companies following the socialist model of the Soviet Union because of like physical proximity exerts tremendous influence. But that's not the point. The point is that the state-owned companies are able to invest all of the capital that they earn into international finance markets. So the returns on those investments pay for the welfare, pay for the social public services in the Scandinavian countries. Now, Venezuela and Cuba are not allowed to do that, are blocked from international investments of their national funds. So they were never able to invest in the international market, and so they are effectively cut off. And that's a big reason for the relative lack of economic development in the last 100 years. I mean, they've never been able to, participate in the capitalist global order.
Yeah. No, that is a great point. And I mean that, because that gets at to the ideological debate, because, they say socialism always fails. And then, Western Marxists point to the countries in Scandinavia and say, no, Norway has a state-owned oil company. Norway has the greatest sovereign wealth fund per capita of any country on the planet. Like they're one of the most wealthy countries per capita due to their sovereign wealth fund and their ownership of the, public ownership of the oil reserves. But they don't allow the brown countries that same thing, and so there's hypocrisy there. But it's an important point that the white European countries are allowed to engage in a measure of socialism, whereas other developing countries are just there to be exploited, and they are not allowed to develop like we allow white European countries to develop. So that's a great point. And
the Gulf states do as well, but of course they're aligned
vassals
with They're I don't know.
Well, and the Scandinavian countries are vassals. They're politically owned vassals, just like the the Gulf states. And we see that when when Denmark takes those Chinese assets, and when Norway is doing whatever Norway was doing with their embassy. You were saying, Leo?
Holland took the Chinese asset, the chips company.
Well, It's weird because Holland and the Netherlands and the Dutch are all the same people.
Right. But you said Denmark.
Oh, I was thinking. Yeah, no, my mistake. Thank you for correcting me.
They're all the same
So-
anyway. They all eat terrible food. Anyway, sorry.
Fish and chips. I don't know what else you would eat over there.
No, that's England.
They don't have, I would assume they had, but I've never been. I have never been to Scandinavia. I kind of assumed they might eat fish and chips.
Like,
but I have no idea.
I mean, no, let's not get off track.
I know they have butter
We'll do a
cookies.
food episode.
I know they sell Danish butter cookies. Those
those are
big
good.
round tins. You know those big round tins.
Yeah, those are good. We're gonna do a special episode on the relationship of cuisines and imperialism.
Given the size of the buildup of U.S. forces out in the waters off Venezuela, it seems pretty clear that some sort of aggression is planned. What you might see do we see a parallel with Syria where when the heat got too hot for the Russians, they just split from Syria? I mean, because my question is, the Russians have not a large, but a fairly large connection to Venezuela, both in military preparation and military sales, and in the general economy. The Chinese have a huge investment in the infrastructure and revitalizing the oil industry in Venezuela. And Venezuela's plan is to pay back the Chinese this $66 billion in cheap oil. So so if the U.S. invades Venezuela, are they going? I mean, they might run into the Russians and the Chinese, the Chinese not in a military sense, but the Chinese certainly an economic sense. So
The last time Russia sent 3 fighter jets to Venezuela.
yes,
But firstly, I mean, I don't think we can blame Russia for leaving Syria. The situation there was just too much.
Well, they haven't
It
left.
probably would not have helped much. They could not. I mean, they invested so much, 10 years long, into protecting Syrian sovereignty, but the situation was just getting too bad. And we cannot overestimate the capacity of China and Russia, in Venezuela as well, because it's so far away. To logistically speaking, to militarily defend Venezuela is just not very realistic.
Well, so there's a couple of things.
Go ahead, Ian.
So Syria goes to that timeline of events of when the HTS, that Turkish NATO-backed HTS offensive started in Aleppo. So there was Russian Air Force support of that, and then at a certain point, it stopped. The main problem is that the Syrian army was just running away; they weren't fighting, and the Russians kind of found themselves in these defensive positions by themselves, literally, because the Syrians ran away. And at some point, the airstrikes also stopped, and the reason afterwards it was revealed was because they were already in negotiations. They were kind of realizing, okay, this Assad is done. Assad himself kind of realized that and escaped the coup. I guess a couple of his family members did not escape the coup, unfortunately for them. But Assad's, the immediate family, escaped before they were detained because there was an actual there was a military coup as well. That was part of basically his entire inner circle turned on him, and that's part of why the collapse was so fast, and Assad was being kept in the dark because the people advising him were also in on the coup. So that's the story with Syria. Now, as far as I do have to say, the Russians have gotten their fingers burnt in Latin America before, because if we remember the Falklands War, Argentina did have Soviet I don't quite remember what the deal was with them, but they did have Soviet support, and it was in. I mean, and the Argentinians did have the weapons to give the British a hard time. I mean, it doesn't mean they, so just looking on paper at the two military forces, Argentinians weren't too badly off, but they just underperformed severely. So I'm not an expert on Latin America. I don't speak Spanish. I don't really know, I don't think most people can really say what is the state of the Venezuelan government, the military. Would it collapse like a lawn chair, like Argentina did, or would they put up a fight? It's really,
yeah.
And I think there might be some because the problem is if you give someone weapons and then the weapons just get dropped and not fired, then you just gave them a bunch of your weapons for no reason. So I don't know. So there might be some. So I don't know.
The somewhat popular opinion or analysis in our kind of circles seems to be that the regime change operation will likely succeed. Or I don't know. Maybe you've heard other things. I've just heard this analysis that if it comes to a decapitation strike, that Venezuela will probably not be able to defend itself or safeguard Maduro. Maduro might have to escape, and that this will likely succeed. But as things go, it will, of course, backfire. It will forever end any South American kind of lingering hope to establish healthy relationship with the United States going forward. Even the national bourgeoisie of Latin American countries will take this as a gross violation of rights, national rights.
I haven't heard any kind of pessimistic speculation of that sort, actually. It's interesting that you're seeing that kind of analysis. I haven't seen much. I mean, I think people mostly in my social media circle, they're certain that something's going to happen, and they're kind of speculating what that is. But I haven't seen a lot of people saying Maduro's toast, kind of a thing. I'm pretty optimistic. I mean, that was what separated Venezuela from these other governments that have been couped, is that they have control of their military. Remember Chavez was ousted in 2000, and then it was the military and his tight, ties with the military that ended up saving him. And so I think Venezuela has been smart to really, have control of the military, and I'm hoping that's going to be effective for them. Go ahead, Carlo.
It really hurts me to say this,
Okay,
but I think Maduro's approaching the Trump regime with us and telling them that he's willing to talk and that they can in essence tap the natural resources of Venezuela and work with him. That demonstrates to me that Maduro is not confident that they can stave off a U.S. invasion. I think that's as close to the horse's mouth as you're going to find. Venezuela has 28 million people. And I don't think it could really handle an invasion by
so
US.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to be optimistic. I mean, and really, I know times are changing. It's not the 1910s anymore. You can't capture a whole country with 50 Marines anymore. But the track record, the USA's military track record in Latin America is pretty. I mean, when has an invasion or regime change or any kind of military operation
the Contras, Bay of Pigs.
Okay. I mean, the Contras and Bay of Pigs aren't U.S. troops, though. I mean, even with the Bay of Pigs, that was Cubans, and there was no U.S. military participation. I mean, Bay of Pigs was a total disaster and bad intelligence, bad everything, but it wasn't the U.S. military either.
So ultimately, what the issue is who is going to benefit from Venezuelans' resources. The West does not want those resources to benefit the people, which is represented by the Maduro government. So the big core issue is who is going to control and benefit from these immense resources. And so the United States is willing to engage in, this regime change operation. So undoubtedly, they are engaged in what they did in Syria and what they tried to do in Iran, which is threaten and buy these generals in the military, right? So they're hoping to control enough of the Venezuelan military to be able to effectively overthrow Maduro and install Machado. And so that's the question. Are they going to be successful? So I have, again, you guys are all pessimistic. It's interesting to hear your pessimism. I'm optimistic because I know that, they have made a priority of controlling the military. Now, it's true that Maduro only has about 54%, right? He won about 54% of the vote. So he has a majority, but it's definitely not a tremendously overwhelming majority. And so there is a large base of support in the country that is in opposition to him. So, I mean, it just depends on how this plays out, because if they just start bombing Caracas, like that's gonna push people to support the Maduro government, right? Nobody wants to be attacked. So I don't think it's that easy for the United States to accomplish this. What I think they could accomplish is just reduce, Venezuela to Libya, right? Reduce it to a failed state. Really mess it up, and then allow Maduro to continue governing this country that is, is a basket case and incapable of even exploiting its resources because they've all been bombed, right? All the oil infrastructure has been bombed, all the gold mines have been bombed, and so just turn them into a basket case, I think, is a higher possibility. But those are my thoughts.
No, I wasn't trying to be critical of the military so much, but I think one of the mistakes that Chavez and Maduro have made is they've allowed too much of the old capitalist system, where 75% of the Venezuelans in a very resource-rich country lived in abject poverty. They've allowed too much of the capitalist system, especially the media down there, and a lot of the manufacturing to be in private hands. It's still in private hands. There's absolutely no there. They do have socialist elements, but they're certainly nowhere close to communist in that sense. And that's why you can have somebody like Maria Machado win the Nobel Prize, which I find very suspicious. To me, it almost seems as though Norway colluded and the U.S. colluded into giving Machado the Nobel Prize as another excuse for invading that country. I mean,
and I think it's possible. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, finish.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I think you're right, because I mean, I was like, that was such a huge coincidence. Even before this, like even in the last couple of years, like I used to binge watch some shows on Amazon Prime, and I just noticed like how often the bad guys are Venezuelans. Like they're bad guys more often than even the Russians. Like it felt like every other show, like these Venezuelan special forces or these Venezuelan drug dealers or whatever. And like Carlos said, I have to agree with you. It seemed too much like theater. It's just such a massive coincidence that the true democratic leader of Venezuela was the Nobel Peace Prize winner. And even the thing where kind of Trump was kind of having a meltdown on Truth Social, I think even because, I find it hard to believe that Trump could have not known ahead of time. I even feel like because we all know he wants to be like Obama and he wants the Peace Prize. I feel like maybe that was theaters, like because they know, okay, we want to take out because a prize is a price. The feather in Trump's cap is going to be regime changing Venezuela. So they could say, hey, we're going to have this person that we all want to win the Nobel Peace Prize. You can go on Truth Social and throw a temper tantrum about it to make it seem more real. And also the thing that does too is it makes liberals who are kind of against Trump still kind of on board, like I've been on social media the past couple of days. I've noticed that like even the most diehard anti-Trump like Europeans, just people are just anti-Trump to the end of time, are still on board with Trump. Even people who hate Trump are on board with Trump attacking Venezuela. So I think if it was a marketing ploy, it absolutely worked. It got both sides on board, even the anti-Trump side on board with.
Absolutely. I mean, they're of course all on board on the most important things, which is imperialism. All the European liberals who hate Trump, are agree with him on Israel, or not all, but like a huge section of especially German liberals. They agree with Trump on China. They agree with Trump on Russia. They agree with Trump on everything. Well, they would say that Trump is too friendly with these countries, but they agree with imperialism.
Yeah.
And even some of the pundits on Venezuela, actually the ones that are on the Democrat payroll, they don't get the situation in Venezuela any more than they get the situation in Ukraine. I've heard a number of them talk about Machado. Oh, well, the Nobel Prize, it's wonderful. It's gone to this woman in Venezuela, and she's for human rights, and she's for fair elections and all that. Everything that she's not for, and they swallow it whole. They have no critical. They can't make that critical step that we make all too easily. That this invasion has nothing to do with drug smuggling, which is the first time we've mentioned it on the program today. It has everything to do with stealing Venezuela's natural resources. Well, these people, these ninnies, with their democratic podcasts, don't know the basic nuts and bolts about what's been going on in Venezuela for years. They haven't studied it. It obviously didn't interest them. They know nothing about it. Unless you're a Ben Norton, you know everything about it. But
Ben's really good, really good on Central and South America.
Terrific. And so there is that going on too. A real ignorance among the general population.
So Machado. Oh, go ahead.
No.
Well, I was gonna talk about Machado and her positions on things. So she was a big supporter of Juan Guaido, who was the U.S. appointed president of Venezuela in absentia, and she has urged the United States to sanction her country, and she really wants us to regime change her country. And she promises once she's the president, she is going to privatize the resources, and she's gonna give great deals to Western corporations to control the gold mines, control the oil, control the natural gas. And so that's her position, and so she's perfect, and so everybody loves her. But it's so reprehensible to think that that's going to come about. I mean, it's just rank, naked, brazen imperialism, and she's the comprador, she's the puppet that is going to try and facilitate that. She's going to be used. She's just like Juan Guaido, just like Zelensky, destroying her country to benefit, the wealthy elites in the West. So,
and the already mostly discredited or like illegitimate Nobel Peace Prize has lost all of its remaining legitimacy.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how all of these global institutions are co-opted and used as tools of imperialism. And if they can't be co-opted and used as tools, then they're kind of just destroyed or marginalized. You never hear about them. So these are just institutions that promote and serve the interests of imperialism. And you can see that. I mean, the same has been true of the Caucasian Court, right? The whatever that's called, this
International Caucasian Court,
Criminal Court, and there's two of them. And
you mean the ICJ and the ICC?
Yeah, that's right. Those two. And our friend, the international law expert, whose name is escaping me, he did a good job of always explaining how one of those courts is actually better than the other, but there's always an effort to co-opt them and just use them for imperialist purposes. And that's why, of course, you'll never see Netanyahu in either one of those, even though
You're
that's
speaking
where
of Christopher Black. Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah.
that's fine. Very fond of Christopher.
I think ICJ is a little bit better. But yeah, the post-war world order, starting with the UN, the establishment of the UN. I mean, of course, the US has an outsized influence over all of these institutions. The UN itself, I mean, the international security, what is that called?
Security Council.
Yeah, exactly. The Security Council. I mean, huge countries like Brazil is not part of it. Like, why? And they're all located in Europe. Why? Indonesia is not part of the Security Council, I think. I mean,
there's the 5 permanent members, which are the victorious, powers from World War II, the main powers, and then there's rotating people. I think it's like a 12-member council, but 7 are rotating members, and then 5 permanent. I think it's something like that. So the U.S. can officially, veto anything because they have a veto, and then they're always just conniving and putting pressure on the rotating members to block whatever they want or to try and put anything they want forward. Now I know Thomas Ortiz here. I think he lives in Nicaragua. And so he probably has an interesting perspective about all these things going on. And I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure he was a Facebook friend living in Nicaragua. So, okay, Argentina. Go ahead.
Well, I think because it is USA's backyard. I mean, one, it's outsized importance. The USA can't afford to fail in Latin America like it can, because if you invade Iraq or whoever, doesn't work out the way you want it to, you can kind of, it is a war of choice. And I think it's a little bit different with Latin America because it is what the USA considers its backyard. So it's you can't invade a Latin American country and then fail. And also, I think they just have a much better finger on the pulse of all of those countries. I mean, and Billy Bob, this, you go any military unit or ship, I want, like every third person there is a Spanish speaker. I want to talk to Garcia. Well, and the first question is, well, which one? We got 10 of them. So I think it's just the language barrier and all those other cultural differences, all that stuff that affects the USA's ability to nation build elsewhere is much less of a problem in Latin America because it's in its backyard. It's logistically easier. It's culturally not alien. So I think he's honestly right to negotiate or try to negotiate. It might be too late to negotiate, but I think negotiating to avoid an invasion is probably the right call for Venezuela because, there's just a country of 30 million people can't win against a country of 360 million people. It's not mathematically possible.
And that's certainly worrying what the commenter said, that the military might be, on board with the Comprador section. That's seriously worrying. But then again, even if it succeeds, right? It's ending the United States, any kind of, voluntary relationship with Latin American countries, largely.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know. It's a region with a very. I'm not an expert in Latin America. I preface that with everything, but it's a very troubled region. I don't think there's going to be some huge blow to U.S. credibility. It's just not.
Well, in 2025, if the U.S. literally just invades a sovereign country on trumped up charges, on the pretext of narcotics, what are all of the other Latin American countries going to think? I don't know. Maybe.
Well, I was going to talk about Argentina, and it's kind of related. So Javier Milei, a self-proclaimed anarcho-capitalist, trying to prove that libertarianism is a viable economic system that is going to, result in, increased prosperity for everyone. It hasn't worked out very well for Javier. He just had to get a $20 billion bailout from the United States. And I think as part of that deal, he has opened Argentinian military bases to U.S. troops. So the U.S. is going to be able to use Argentina, as a logistics hub, as they, pursue this Fortress America doctrine, where they're just really, anchoring themselves in the Americas, right, and making sure that they control the Americas tightly and all the resources. So, it would be a huge boon for the West, the United States, if they controlled these immense resources in Venezuela. And I don't think that there would really be any kind of, like, talking about losing prestige. Like, I mean, again, all you care about is power, and the governments in these other countries, what they think doesn't matter. Like, if you have the power to coerce them and control them and remove them if necessary, like, their opinion or their concern about, your rank imperialism, it just doesn't matter. And so I think it would be tremendous defeat. I mean, the Bolivarian Revolution that took power in the 2000s with Chavez, I mean, it was a great thing, and its end would be disastrous. And then, what would be next? Nicaragua would be next, maybe Cuba. And so, I mean, we don't want to see that happen. I'm really, I don't think it will. Like, I have a lot of optimism in the Maduro government, in the Venezuelan people, to be protected and defended by their military. And we're going to see. But I have faith that they're going to succeed in, defeating whatever Trump tries. But if they're not able to, it is. I mean, to me, it would be very bad. It would be a catastrophe.
Yeah, I'm not sure about not needing, or that the opinions of countries don't matter with naked imperialism, because imperialism always needs the collaboration of the compradors, of the comprador bourgeoisie, who benefit from their relationship. But if national sovereignty is violated in such a blatant, violent way,
well,
right?
I don't know.
I mean,
The compradors want Maduro to go. The compradors will be cheering it. They'll be like those guys that Netanyahu talked to. Remember, Netanyahu said, those people that condemn me, they privately thank me. And that's going to be what's going to happen with these comprador countries like that, the guy in Ecuador, these different puppets we've put in. Now, certainly the actual non-aligned countries like Brazil, they're not going to be happy, but Malay is going to be stoked, and he's probably not even going to say anything against it. He's going to be like, yeah, get those socialists out of there. And a lot of them will have that same thought. Obviously, Lula won't, but a lot of those countries will. Go ahead, Carlo.
I was just going to say, well, on the subject of Lula has had his problems with Maduro. Now, I think an invasion by the U.S. will iron out those problems very quickly. When you come to Milei, he's really a special case, because Besant, who holds this position in the U.S. government now, a close associate of his, was heavily invested in Argentina and lost all of his money when Argentina's economy collapsed. And so that's another factor there, that ties the Trump administration to Latin America in general, but Argentina in particular. But to go back up the West Coast, now currently the big drug smuggler, and let's get back to the drug smuggling, is Ecuador, because they've lost Colombia. Preto which is, I think, prompted this a lot of the pressure being increased on Venezuela because of the Colombian vote, and how Preto has been very courageous in carrying out his program. But Noboa, who's the president of Ecuador, he owns the one of the largest banana fleets producers in Latin America, and those several times now, his bananas coming up into the U.S. This is how flagrant it is, and it's on the West Coast. Doesn't have anything to do with Venezuela, because if you look at a map, Venezuela does not have any
Yeah, no, it's
coast
preposterous.
on the Pacific.
So
He's
we're
been flagged by U.S. authorities. His ships have been flagged, yet the U.S. still does business with him.
Cocaine bananas. It's cocaine bananas. You peel them back, and it's just a bunch of cocaine that's white, not a banana.
Yes, it's all cocaine, and which must be delicious. But I also think one thing I want to say about Maduro is he's no Chavez. I think he's done a wonderful job staying in power, given the pressure's been put on him.
Yeah.
But I think Chavez could do a better job. And also, the higher up you get in the military, I think in any of these countries, the more likely you're going to have people who want to go for the bucks that the U.S. offers, the prestige, the money prestige. But
yeah, and again, it's nothing that the Venezuelan government isn't aware of and shouldn't have been working to keep from happening, all these decades. And so the question is, have they done enough? And I think it's going to be tested. I'm optimistic, but definitely you got to know that this, that your resources are such a big prize that inevitably, they're going to be trying to bribe and threaten your military to turn against you. And so what can you do to keep that from happening? We're about to see, Thomas was thinking that, the way they were talking after Machado won the Peace Prize, that, it sounds to him as if, they've already got, some of the military in their pocket, which is possible.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, unfortunately. And when it comes to Nicaragua and Cuba, Venezuela's been supplying them with cheap oil, and excuse me, I don't know how they're able to process Venezuela's oil. I do know that the Koch brothers, the Koch Industries, has one of the few plants to process Venezuelan crude in Texas, but anyway, that it also might they're planning it that it may spell the demise for Nicaragua and Cuba after the failed coup, attempted coup. Well, actually, in 2018 in Nicaragua, I think they still have their eye on toppling the Ortega government.
Yeah,
Can you imagine how petty that is? Think of how few people are living in those areas, and what it would be. I mean, you could do what the Chinese do and uplift everybody, all 5.3 million people in Venezuela. You could, and there is. I don't want to get too far off. There is talk again of building the new canal through Venezuela again, which may explain why China so easily
through Nicaragua, correct?
Yeah, through Nicaragua, right. So easily gave up their attempt to make more inroads in the Panama Canal. But anyway.
So the not long ago, Chevron inked a deal with the Venezuelan government to exploit or refine or something. And so that got a lot of these anti-Venezuelans really angry with Trump, because Trump allowed Chevron to sign an energy agreement, and bypass the current sanctions and the economic embargo. So, Trump obviously, so he did something that was, it seemed like a handout to the Maduro government. But now he's really, pushed it back the other way, right? And so you just see him now. It seems like he's going to be going all out to try and get, a regime change. He doesn't want to call it regime change, but we'll see. So, but it's interesting that not long ago, a couple months, there was this energy agreement that kind of contradicted the sanctions that we've had against Venezuela for decades now. And that's kind of the problem, right? We've been impoverishing that country. And so, Venezuela, if we want to talk about the ideological debate between, is socialism a valid economic approach? What is socialism, and how come socialism always fails? If you hear the libertarian pro-capitalist talk, they always point to Venezuela and say, "Oh man, Venezuela is so wealthy," and Cuba was doing so great, and then socialism came, and both countries are just ridiculously poor. Obviously, that's a spurious argument, because in reality, there's a thing called economic warfare. Making their economy scream, which was what Kissinger said he was going to do to Chile. Because they had a somewhat leftist, a president they got allowed into power. So, imagine what Venezuela could do. Imagine what Cuba could do if it wasn't for this economic blockade, if it wasn't for these sanctions, and they were allowed to just freely trade and utilize their own natural resources. It's one of the most resource-rich countries on the planet, and undoubtedly it could be a really tremendous society. And that's why it's the threat of the good example, and that's why the sanctions are necessary, and that's why an effort at regime change is necessary, because people are getting pissed that, hey, why aren't we being able to, access this oil? So even Western corporations are putting pressure. Hey, why are these sanctions? And so, they're gonna try and get the government out of there, replace it with a puppet government, and then they don't mind. They don't, as long as they control the government, they don't mind letting the resources flow to the rest of the world like they would otherwise. Anyway.
Okay. So there's been a couple comments. It's a lively comment section tonight.
Oh, I've been ignoring.
This, go ahead. Yeah. So some people asking on the troubles. Well, so as far as any war goes, right? So Otto von Clausewitz, the German guy, who's often credited as one of the fathers of modern military theory as we know it. He described a trinity. And this trinity was three parts of the government, the military, and the people. So three parts of your own country and an enemy country. So in a healthy nation state, those three parts all work together, and they're part of the same identity. So when you have the problem in Syria is they really don't have a Trinitarian country, because it's not us and them, right? They see Assad, they see the military as like these separate entities.
He was explaining Clausewitz to us, frozen. Hopefully, yeah. No, it's the CIA. They don't want us to learn Clausewitz. No, while he was talking, I was thinking, I prefer Marx to Clausewitz, but I was listening. But yeah, I mean, he was explaining some of the concepts that Clausewitz employs, and I'm thinking,
I lost the connection. You still with me? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just spontaneously lost connection for a second there. So, it's Syria. There's a problem with Syria. They don't really see it as their government. And one thing that's very, and I have this argument with liberals. I mean, talking to liberals is like pointless. I don't know why I try. But, so this woman, was asking other countries to invade her own country. In a normal, healthy country, if one of your political candidates or political leaders, regardless of how popular that person was, starts advocating invasion of themselves, that person's done. Because even if you hate your government, even if you just think your government sucks in every possible way, it's still your government, it's your people, it's your soldiers, your own people who comprise that government and military. You don't advocate for a foreign enemy to come in and kill them and humiliate your country, because any time a foreign country comes in and just tramples you and exerts their will over you is humiliating, whether it's a big country or a small country. It's humiliating. No person, that person should just be ostracized, even if he was popular. So when this leader, as far as I can tell, I mean, I don't know that. I'm not Venezuelan. I can't go on the street and ask them how popular she is. But it's a little troubling that someone can say that and not have their popularity immediately go down to zero, right? Even Navalny in Russia, because like in Russia, no Russian, even a popular Russian candidate cannot say things like that. Even Navalny, if you look at Navalny's, the things he actually, I mean, I know he's presented a certain way in Western media, but if you look at Navalny when he was actually seriously trying to be someone important in Russia, he had all of the right pro-Russian talking points. He was pro-unification with Crimea. He said all of the right things. He only started saying that stuff that Western liberals want to hear after he was done, and he was just speaking primarily to a Western audience. He never said this stuff when he was actually trying to be president of Russia. So I don't think that's a good sign for Venezuela.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty obvious. They're a divided society. So I think she won, 40-something% of the vote when they had the election. I think the people, right? So, Clausewitz divides, the people, the military, and the state, right?
The state,
yes. Government. The thing is, the people are also divided, right? And so there's not only, ethnic divisions, religious divisions, there's also class divisions. And I think the class divisions, are the most important. And really, that's who the empire works with, right? They work with the ownership class of various, vassal states, and they want that ownership class to be the ruling class. And they make sure that that ownership class benefits tremendously and disproportionately from the relationship. And I mean, that's just how imperialism works. And so all around the world, it's the United States identifying and promoting the bourgeoisie, the elite class of any given society. They allow them to come to the United States, go to, be educated here. They teach them about the superiority of liberalism and this way of doing things. And then they, make sure that they stay in power. And what is their job once they're in power? Well, their job once they're in power is to facilitate the, exploitation of the labor market, the resources, etc., and to make sure that the, Western corporations and the Western system benefits disproportionately. And who suffers? It's the majority working class in whatever vassal state we're talking about. So, for instance, before the year 2000 in Venezuela, it was really, really shitty for the vast majority of Venezuelan people. And that's why they were able to utilize the electoral process, the democratic process, and actually come to power. And they had a revolution in that country. Chavez called it the Bolivarian Revolution, but it was bloodless, for the most part. And of course, it's been under attack ever since it came to power. But this is the most important dynamic to me in understanding reality and looking at things is the class dynamic and how the ownership class is part and parcel of global imperialism. And without this understanding, and so I'm very dismissive of Clausewitz and anybody who engages in the process of theory and totally ignores the reality of class, because that is fundamental. It is the central. It's the core thing to understand what's going on. But that's my opinion. Everybody.
Yeah, let me just point out the difference between the comprador bourgeoisie, which is the ownership class that works, collaborates, and profits from serving the interests of empire. But there's also the national bourgeoisie, which is for national sovereignty, which is for national, for their own. They want to be bosses of their own country. They want to exploit.
And they can be worked with.
They want to reap. Sorry?
Those people can be worked with. Those people can be allies in the
anti-imperialist. Well, the national bourgeoisie will often turn against imperialism. The national bourgeoisie is often, the definition of national is that they want national sovereignty, right? So for example, there's the comprador bourgeoisie has largely been defeated and exiled in Russia, for example, and what's left in Russia that still has some power, very limited, I would say, is the national bourgeoisie. Then that relates to my earlier question of, how many comprador bourgeoisie in Latin American countries will become nationalist, will become sovereigntist with such blatant, violation of sovereignty in Venezuela. It's a question.
Well, the problem is the issue is that compradors and nationalists are in absolute opposition to each other because if you have a colonial, and I think that's a problem with colonialism, especially when you're going to regions that are still tribes and they've never had their own modern nation state. You impose this colonial authority on them. And then it's hard, even after that colonial authority leaves, it's hard to establish legitimate government because people are so used to the military and the government being just the representatives of some foreign power. So you look in India, you look at any country that's been ruled by an external colonial authority for a long time, it's difficult even afterwards for any government to have legitimacy. And like specifically India, you have English was a deliberate strategy by the British. Say, okay, English, our compradors are going to speak English. And then, so even after the British left, there's still this hierarchy, this rigid social hierarchy, this exaggerated caste system the British created. So I think that's a problem in every former colonial country. And that's not, and so no, Billy Bob, I have to disagree with you. It's actually normal. And I'll give you an example. During the election, the U.S. election, when Zelensky came and campaigned for Kamala, the reaction was overwhelmingly negative. Actually, there was even, it was actually basically admitted afterwards, they denied it at the time. Even the British government was planning to send people to campaign, like sending actual government representatives from Britain to come to the USA and campaign for Kamala. But there was so much negativity that they canceled it. And so and I think, all of the USA's problems, but, we obviously have a lot of problems, but people are very hostile to the idea of a foreign power coming in and say, oh, well, you need to vote for this person. It's just absolute hostility. Same with Russia. If someone's suspected of being, foreign influence. And that's why it's such a great thing to accuse people of, even when it's not true, because it's such a credibility destroyer. Oh, well, this person's working for the Russians, or this person's it's just such a great credibility destroyer. And that's and I think that's the normal
the relationship between what you're saying and what I was saying, because I'm not understanding.
Well, you're saying you're disagreeing with, the Clausewitzian Trinitarian model. And it's like, no, that actually matches up with it, because Latin America has a problem. I mean, it's a Spanish word, for God's sake, comprador governments. It's this lasting colonial influence, and it's difficult for any Latin American country to really establish itself as a proper nation state, as opposed to people saying, well, I don't like this government. There's a lot of poverty. Maybe it would be a good thing if the USA comes in, topples this guy, and puts a person I actually like into the presidency.
I wouldn't say I disagree with Clausewitz. I just say there's limitations to the theory, and any theory that doesn't appreciate the paradigm of class and how class gets exploited. Like if you don't talk about class, if you don't explain, if that's not part of your theory, then your theory is very limited and it has very limited utility.
I mean,
and so that would be my thing. I wouldn't say Clausewitz is wrong. I would just say
he was also not alive when that was going. But go ahead, Carlo has been dying to say something. Carlo,
it's been 27 years since Chavez was first elected president. The revolution began to take place. That's a generation, a little more than a generation. And the object of United States policy towards Venezuela was to keep the 75% of the people in Venezuela before Chavez that lived in abject poverty, to maintain that level of poverty, to make sure that their lives were miserable.
Yeah.
And I hope Mr. Ortiz is still out there, because he could better answer this than any of us. Is this new generation getting fed up with this new kind of poverty that's been put upon the Venezuelan people by the United States? And are they sophisticated enough as an electorate or as a people to to see what's actually happening,
Yeah.
or it's because your material well-being's at stake here. It reminds me much of that comedian Bill Hicks when he talks about that movie with Jack Palance in it. And Jack Palance is this really bad guy, but he's been hired to take the land from all the farmers around so these ranchers can move in. So there's this farmer out on the street, and the Jack Palance, who's a hired gunman, goes up to him and says, it starts to harass him. And the farmer says, I don't have a gun. I don't have a gun. I don't have a gun. So Palance pulls out another gun and throws it in front of the farmer. And he goes, pick up the gun.
Yeah.
And the farmer, no, man, I'm not a, I don't know how to handle a gun. Pick up the gun. So, finally, the farmer reaches for the gun and Palance shoots him dead. He had a gun. That's that's sort of what U.S. foreign policy is like. We're going to back you into a corner, and I think that's where Venezuela is now. I don't know how the general population is responding to the fact that despite all the help they've gotten from the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians, for that matter, that it's been enough to offset the material well-being enough. Give them material well-being.
We were racially profiling Ortiz. He is from the Bronx. He is not from Nicaragua, so I made a mistake.
From the Bronx.
But he still might know. He still might have some insights.
Yeah.
So no, I mean that's a good point, Carlo. I mean, and that's what remains to be seen, and how educated are the people? I mean, do they know exactly what's going on? I think they do. I think the people of Venezuela are keenly aware of what's going on. And I think, I think a large majority, even probably a bigger majority than just voted for Maduro, which was like 54%. I mean, it's probably going to be way more than that are going to be siding with him and pushed, to support the government if and when, bombs start dropping. And so I am optimistic. I don't know a viable path that, can effectively regime change. I mean, again, are they just going to try and murder Maduro and murder the parliament with just dropping bombs on them? Like that would be crazy and reprehensible. And so I think we might find out, within a week or two, if not way sooner, what the plan is. But go ahead. Ian.
I think Venezuela might just be in trouble because they got picked as the weakest target, because I do think that big strike on Iran was kind of a feeler, is a probe to see how successful it would be, and what the Iranian response was, if those stress fractures would appear in the Iranian government and society. And it was, Iran was caught unprepared. They had a lot of sleeper cells they didn't know about. There's a lot of problems and weaknesses they did not know about until that attack happened, like with the Hezbollah attack. But they rounded up, those people who were disloyal and cooperating with the USA and Israel. They were caught. Large numbers of them were caught. And they strengthened ties with Russia. Russia's been sending a lot of transport planes to Iran. Iran had to admit, because up to this point they'd been turning down the Russian S-400 system. No, our organic, homemade air defenses are fine. And they kind of realized, well, they're not as fine as we thought they were. So Iran came out stronger, and they also thrashed Israel. Like Israel has not ever, I don't think Israel has ever in its history been hit as hard as Iran hits them in those missile strikes. So I think that took Iran up.
Let me support your point right there. I have this thing from the Gray Zone. Again, I saw it on Telegram this morning. It's just kind of talking about what you just said. According to new documents obtained by the Gray Zone, Iranian missiles in June hit a building that sits on the secretive Site 81 Command and Control Center in Tel Aviv, built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The strike was subject to extreme censorship inside Israel, and even a Fox News reporter was barred from moving towards the area. Google has also censored the area by blurring it and removing the Street View feature. Site 81 is located among densely populated residential neighborhoods, and it's even close to a children's playground. And apparently it was directly hit and just obliterated. So, yeah, Israel was keen to censor that fact, but they definitely did get hit very hard, which contributed to them ending it after just 12 days.
And there's that. And I also, I mean, I feel, I don't know how to feel about this, I know it's too early to pop open the champagne yet, but I'm not sure how I feel about, this Trump negotiated ceasefire, because it's basically the same, as a lot of people pointed out, it's basically the same deal that Hamas offered like 2 days, like not even 48 hours into the conflict. This is the deal offered you. We will give up our prisoners. You give us some of your prisoners that we want back, and that's the end of it. But then they decide, no, we want to dick around and kill 500,000 people first.
Yeah.
And I feel like the main reason for that is Israel kind of got a hard, that's kind of, I don't have proof for it, but it's my suspicion that Israel finally got that hard no from the USA. No, we're not going to invade. You did too poorly in that war, and just Iran is too strong a target. We're not going to invade Iran for you. It's not going to happen. And there was, at that point, there was no causes, because while the fight with Hamas is happening, they can use it as a casus belli to say, oh, well, we have to, deploy NATO to defend our most wonderful ally, Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East. We have to take out Iran. Now it's off the table, and there was just not a purpose to dragging this out further. So I have a feeling that's the reason they're winding it down in Gaza. And now it's good for Iran. It's good for Palestinians, definitely, but it's probably not good for Venezuela, because I do feel like to be the proper emperor of the free world, Trump has to brutalize somebody, right? Because I think even because, like we were saying, European liberals, to get their respect, you need to kill people. Then the European liberal will love you if you kill people. They will even at least admit that Trump is like when he bombed Syria in his first term. Even CNN said he was presidential. This was, Trump's most presidential moment when he bombed the hell out of Syria and killed people, killed Iranian diplomatic. Yes. So I think, unfortunately, Venezuela is going to be that sacrificial lamb in his second term, where NATO, because I don't think NATO is doing too good right now. Just things aren't great for them. I mean, getting beaten up by teenagers with homemade weapons in Gaza. I mean, that's just not a glorious military adventure for Western soldiers and Western weapon systems. Ukraine's not exactly going gloriously for Western weapon systems. I mean, they need somebody they can say, look at this big, dictatorship in Latin America that we overthrew. I think they need that victory to, boast about. And they can boast about their stealth bombers and their, all of their super weapons, Tomahawk missiles.
Rights, and also just controlling those resources. I mean, especially if they plan on, a huge global conflagration, in an upcoming impending, economic war against China, at least economic, but partly asymmetrical, so they really need to, to have access to and control these huge reserves, because, the economy, the global economy is going to suffer. The energy market is going to suffer if, again, there's a big war against Iran, if there's a big, embargo against China, which I think both of those are on the table. But I want to ask Leo, okay, so we did kind of pivot to the Middle East and or West Asia. and this big ceasefire has been the biggest news of the past couple days. I've posted, provocatively that, hey, when is this whole ceasefire going to give way? Is it going to be hours or days? I am not optimistic. I think it's probably going to be just a day or two before the whole thing's called off. Like Hamas ruined it. Netanyahu's saying, hey, war's back on. We're going to occupy Gaza. So I don't know. This just into Telegram. It says Israel plans to cut in half, that is, the number of aid trucks into Gaza and limit distribution of assistance. They blame Hamas for violating ceasefire agreement with slow return of the dead hostages. So I'm not surprised to see that. I expect to see much more of that kind of communication. And I think, this is not going to hold. And I think another fight with Iran could be in the near future. But I was wondering Leo's thoughts because he is our guest.
Well, I mean, Trump's psychology, unfortunately, is kind of a big part of it. I mean, he, wants a Nobel Peace Prize. He, like really badly because Obama got one, and his small dick needs validation. I mean, that's a big part of it, and that might actually make the peace really last a bit longer until he gets that prize. But yeah, of course, it's all theater. Of course, the long-term agenda continues. The continuity of agenda is absolutely consistent throughout the last fucking 500 years. But absolutely in the last 100 years since or 80 years since the end of World War II, the U.S. hegemonic play is absolutely consistent. So yeah, Iran must be taken down. So it's a matter of time. I mean, yeah, who's to say how long the peace deal will last? Yeah, my guess is not long. Also.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, even, it's just amazing. And I've said this before, to me, the absolute stupidest, there's no other contender for this award. The stupidest people in the world are the pro-Ukraine, pro-Palestine people. Those guys. Like, it's like, how do you do that? Like, I mean, they're literally, Ukraine and Israel are literally allies. I mean, Israel sends them weapons and Ukraine sends them military volunteers to kill people in Gaza. How can you sit there? And it's like, it makes even less sense than the people who are pro-Israel and pro-Russia, right? At least I can sort of understand at least, this logical framework you built in your head. But those people I can't understand at all. And I do want to say, as far as this whole, like, even just all, like, I have noticed most of those liberal, I mean, not leftist, but the more those center left liberal type people who say they're pro-Palestine, and I've noticed they still they still believe all of the Israeli talking points, because they don't say, because they're against, I'm against Israel, but I'm also against Iran and Yemen and Syria, Assad and Syria. And this is like, well, okay, you just agree with everything. You just agree with every Israel talking point, but stop short of saying you like Israel. Well, what exactly? I mean, if you say you support Palestinians, but are against every country, Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, like every country and entity that actually materially helps Palestinians, then how exactly are you pro-Palestinian? It's so stupid. And just even the way the argument against Israel is framed, because, a two-state solution. Well, okay, what apartheid state in modern history has been offered a two-state solution? They didn't offer the Boers in South Africa a two-state solution. Just like, oh, hey, do you want to keep those, those blacks in one state and you super white people can have your own? No one said that. They just said eliminate apartheid. But with Israel, it's like, oh, well, you can put all those filthy non-Jews in their own little camp that they can call a state. And you get, even the most anti-Israel position is pro-Israel.
Well, I mean, the two-state solution can be seen as a stepping stone towards total liberation of Palestine. But yeah, the contradictions are glaring. I mean, and it's so clear that people just simply refuse to see that Israel cannot operate a single day without the support of the USA and the EU. They cannot even exist as it is without the constant, billions of dollars pouring into Israel and the weapons and everything else. And the same for the Ukraine, war against Russia. I mean, it would not last a single day. It's just the parallels are astounding, and the contradictions are absolutely glaring. Like the people who are against the Chinese supposed alleged treatment of Muslims, right? I mean, ETIM, the East Turkestan Independence Movement of the Uyghurs, vocally, openly, passionately support Israel. I mean, this is Muslim minority seeking independence. The leader of ETIM has penned a dozen or more loving articles in Haaretz, saying that the plight of the Israelis in their struggle for independence and freedom is the same as those of Uyghurs. It's this, and the Uyghurs must learn from Israel on how to how to fight fascism and how to fight terrorism and how I mean it's all there on the internet. Just Google East Turkestan relationship to Israel, and they support Israel in other ways as well. It is just absolutely glaring. But of course, none of this bothers the liberals who are pro-Palestine and pro Uyghur independence.
My favorite topic is to discuss liberalism and bash liberalism and talk about how the whole point of liberalism is just to confuse people and to keep them from correctly understanding material reality and how geopolitics works. But I know that probably glazes the eyes of everyone else, and so I'm going to try and resist, launching into that. But I mean, again, yeah, liberalism is the ideology that allows imperialism to pretend it's not imperialism, and allows oligarchy to pretend it's a democracy. I mean, without this ideology, which is a smokescreen for reality, they couldn't get away with the things they do. So they need this liberalism, and then they treat it like it's the new religion, right? It's a crusade to convert everyone to liberalism. And then countries are attacked for not being liberal enough. And then it becomes the reason why we have to attack them and regime change them, because their government's illiberal. And so, again, any kind of liberal opinion, and liberal opinions, I mean, it just spans the gamut as far as perspective. So you could be a liberal from an independent spot, like the ETIM people, the Uyghurs, they're promoting a brand of liberalism. And it can also be, if you're looking at things through religiousness, like Christianity, and it's like, well, we hate Muslims, we hate, Jews even. Most Christians don't feel that way. But I mean, you're engaging in liberalism insofar as you refuse to understand what is really, the fundamentals of reality and what is influencing, geopolitics. And what is influencing, why the United States behaves like it does. It doesn't have to do with religion. It doesn't have to do with race per se. It has, and these things exist. Religious differences exist, racial differences exist, cultural differences exist. These things all exist, but they exist within the overarching framework of, class and, trying to maintain, global hegemony global power in the hands of, the wealthy elites. And that's ultimately what it is. And guess what? It's primarily Western wealthy elites who, for the most part, are Caucasian, and they've just been the beneficiaries of hundreds of years of colonialization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway,
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
have supremely liberalism.
no, absolutely, and that's how
Like,
you know it's fake and it's a hoax, because when liberal values come into contact with imperial interests, the liberal values go out the fucking window. So much so that we'll happily engage in genocide if we think we need to further our imperialist interests. And
absolutely.
not just genocide, but even, I mean, well, genocide is, of course, we consider that like the worst of all crimes, and it is. But also just normal regime change, just normal everyday, not allowing people sovereignty, and because sovereignty, rule of law, these are all liberal values ostensibly. And so some people say, socialism are just liberals that really believe it, and there's some truth to that. But
Yeah, the
I do think
ETIM are
we're
people that literally want, throw acid in the faces of young women for not, for not having the veil, for not wearing a burqa. Like, as illiberal in terms of values as is imaginable. But, all the liberals in the West support them. They want to implement the most fundamentalist version of Sharia law, like actually what Western people are afraid of, right? I mean,
ETIM, you're talking about ETIM?
yeah, I'm talking about ETIM, East Turkestan Independence Movement. This is the most vile fundamentalists,
Not that different
anti-feminist,
from ISIS and Al Qaeda, who
not
were
not so different at all.
our proxies also in West Asia, and then it's like the narco terrorists, of course, are our proxies in Central and South America, and then actual neo Nazis are our proxies in Eastern Europe. And so the imperialists are always siding with the worst of humanity to to be their tools to further their imperialist interests over and over again, and it just works for them because they control the means of production, they control the media, they control the narratives, they control academia, and so they use all these things to keep people confused, to divide people. Anyway, it's
And right now, currently, they're reading the very chilling kind of reading of what's happening domestically in the USA as well as in Europe. Um, can be seen. I mean, what's happening is can be seen as a deliberate attempt to impoverish people, to create poverty, to damage the domestic economy in the Western liberal countries in order to prepare the population for war, in order to uh, get enough young men to enlist.
yeah.
Right? I mean,
All right, no jobs, so you can join the military.
exactly. I mean, what is people say like Trump's tariff war is only hurting America itself. How stupid is that? Like, I'm not sure how stupid it is. I'm not sure if it's stupidity or if it is very calculated sort of attempt, not on his part, but on his, on the powers that be that have power over the presidency. But an overall agenda. I mean, there's also the perspective that Eastern Europe after 1991 has been impoverished, right? The neoliberal shock doctrine that was applied in Eastern Europe in the former Soviet bloc countries in order to prepare for a war against Russia some 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line. I mean, calculating that those countries on the borders of Russia need to be poor. They need to be impoverished in order to create the conditions to turn them into attack dogs against Russia. Ever since after 1991, I think there's a lot of plausibility in that if we consider that the Ukrainian Nazis, ultranationalists, not very much different, were funded by the CIA in 1946, starting in 1946, not missing a single heartbeat after the end of World War One. So, in terms of imperialism, in terms of preventing a Eurasian economic integration, and to take down Russia, of course, is a 400 years old dream of the colonizer countries. So these plans are implemented, are devised, and then methodically implemented over long periods of time, over a century.
Regardless of political party in power, either Democrats or Republicans, it's a democracy. It's your choice. You got two of them, whichever you want, because we don't care. They'll both do the same thing. Exactly. Ian,
I want to catch up. Yes, I've been trying for a few minutes here, so we covered a lot of ground. So, if one, I want to say yes, liberalism or global homogeneity, right? This idea of global homogeneity and liberalism has created a lot of, like Leo was saying, a lot of strange contradictions, especially when you talk about progressive white liberals in Western countries, and how do they deconflict these ideas with their support of the most radical sects of Islam. And you even see radical Islam on their own and deconflicting to pass those loyalty tests, because there are certain loyalty tests everyone has to pass, like supporting Israel. It was like that time, I think this was 5 or 6 years ago, when ISIS accidentally.
When ISIS interrupted our internet stream.
Yeah, what's I'm trying to figure out where Ian is going. He's talking about loyalty tests, and I mean, so even the Islamic extremists have to support Israel, which is
well, I'm sorry, I cut out. It's funny, like my internet is fine until I talk, then it cuts out. I think it's actually the deep state coming after me. But anyways, but Islam deconflicts too. Like the time ISIS accidentally hit an Israeli position, they actually formally apologized. We're sorry for accidentally hitting an Israel. Our wonderful Jewish friends, who we as radical Muslims love so much, and also like even it's just strange seeing how liberals in Western countries act. Like a few weeks ago, this was in the news. Britain has come out and actually advocated for cousin marriage. And of course, Western countries gave up cousin marriage more than 100 years ago because it leads to massive inbreeding. Like Charles Darwin, actually, it's not widely known, but Charles Darwin married his cousin because that was the norm in England at the time. And almost all of their children died because everybody in those two families had been marrying each other for generations. So there's just severe inbreeding. And actually later in his life, Darwin said, if I'd known about genetics, we wouldn't have gotten married, because it's just so terrible seeing all of your children die. But now Britain now is like, well, cousin marriage is fine. And it's just weird. And the reason why is because they have such a large population from Pakistan, which, if you know, Pakistan is one of the worst inbreeding, because it's still very prevalent there. It has one of the worst inbreeding problems in the world. Because
so there's a Pakistan lobby lobbying the British Crown for the right to marry cousins. And
yes. And of course, as a liberal, you can't say no, because you're just not allowed to say that. You're like, no, we're not going to do cousin marriage because it's barbaric and it causes inbreeding. Because it's not, because that means you're a bigot. You are a bigot if you say it. So it's kind of a weird.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so I was going to say, but I think there is something going on with Trump. I think we're going to see a shift. I don't know if it's because I think we already have fascism. I'm not going to say a shift to fascism when you're already there. But I think there's some in the ownership class, in the capitalist class, there's some pushback against, because the thing about liberalism is that's international, right? And I've said this before, I've been saying this for the past several years. The Democrats have this international coalition that overrules national loyalties, because you're not an Englishman, you're not a Frenchman, you're not an American, you are loyal to this global liberal order. That's your loyalty. And I think there's some kind of pushback about that. And that started with Trump, and you're seeing it with like the Czech elections. You're seeing it. And I think you're even seeing it in France, how Macron's coalition is falling apart. I think it's interesting to me how almost every corporation, almost overnight, just kind of said, you know what, we're not going to do all that liberal stuff anymore. We're going to be more kind of what American media was like in the 1950s. It's very interesting to see how quickly they switched. And there's actually something very interesting happening now in the Pentagon. So Hegseth, the Secretary of War, is pushing all of the media outlets that have special access to the Pentagon to basically sign a new contract that basically states that when they have this special access to the Pentagon, they will not pursue classified information to publish. And what's interesting is so many of even the right-wing outlets are pushing back against that. It's just that, all of the left-wing outlets are pushing back against that. And it's interesting to me because to me, it's kind of common sense. Like, you don't see this stuff in Russia. And I guess you don't see it in China either. Like, you don't deliberate, like with the, if you remember the Yemen scandal, when Hegseth or somebody related to him accidentally added that journalist to the Signal chat, right? And he published there. Well, that wouldn't happen in Russia. I don't think it would happen in China either. It wouldn't happen in most other countries because as a journalist, you are trusted. You're not going to, you just say, okay, I overheard something I probably shouldn't have overheard. I'm just going to not publish that. But it's kind of interesting. We have this thing in America where you're just like, oh, I can embarrass the person who's on the other team, and I'm going to do that. The country be damned. Or even that case, I don't know if the story is true or not, for they were just saying it to embarrass him, but there was something a few months ago when there was a failed Navy SEAL operation in North Korea where they were trying to plant a listening device on North Korean soil. They were spotted by some fishermen. They killed the fishermen. And that was published in the media. And as far as I can tell, the only reason they published that is because they wanted to embarrass Trump, because that operation happened on Trump's watch. It's just
it was years later.
Right, but it was under Trump's watch. It was still, it's kind of interesting where you see this international movement and there's pushback, there's nationalist pushback.
Okay, so I have a conception that kind of coincides with what you're saying. And in lieu of anybody else interrupting, I guess I will. I kind of see the same thing. There's a shift. There's a cultural shift from a liberal cultural hegemony to a more conservative cultural hegemony. And, away from the transatlantic alliance to a American first, to a Fortress America. So it's going to be a different approach. And, it's very complicated. There's many aspects to it, but I mean, ultimately they're kind of getting rid of the constraints of liberalism, right? So liberalism is constraining the rule of law, things like that, human rights, all these, they're kind of constraining and, the West has to deal with some serious threats and they don't want these constraints. And so they're shifting to a more fascisty approach. And I've seen that. I've talked about that. It sounds like you're kind of, describing that same shift, that same movement away from something towards something else. And I think that's the best explanation for it. There's a material explanation for this, but it's interesting. Somebody at work, I was at work and they just happened to show me an article they were reading. I don't even know why, but it was interesting because it was like maybe a Vanity Fair online article, or if it wasn't Vanity Fair, it was some kind of just mainstream liberal publication. And it was weird that they were talking about, it was just a random girl. They were celebrating this random girl because her mom asked her what kind of a theme she would like for her birthday party. And they were kind of celebrating her choice. And she chose that she wanted to have a Jesus-themed birthday party. And the whole article was about a Jesus-themed birthday party, kind of celebrating it and saying, oh, this is cool, Jesus-themed. And like, well, where do you get Jesus-themed things? And so to me, like in my mind, I immediately clicked this whole shift in the culture going, from more liberal to a more conservative thing. And I thought, well, that just makes kind of sense. It's like, just what a weird thing. You would never see this, in 5 years ago in any kind of mainstream publication, celebrating a kid. It's definitely not a Christian oriented, magazine. And it might not have been Vanity Fair, but anyway, so
yeah, we are. Sorry, can I just make a comment? I mean, we are a little bit using the the definition, both definitions of liberalism, sort of interchangeably, and that's might be a bit confusing because just now you were talking about in the cultural sense of like progressive values rather than conservative values, and earlier you were talking about liberalism as a political ideology that is based on individual freedom within the context of private ownership of the 0.1%. But anyway, on the cultural tip, let me just say, dialectically speaking, a lot of people in the anti-imperialist movements, which includes communists, are, I would say, dangerously reacting against liberalism in their rightful and just hatred of this fraudulent ideology of liberalism, are reacting a little bit too far and rejecting progressive values. I think some of the progressive values are good. We should tolerate however people want to live their fucking lives. We should, we should have equality. We should, and ultimately, there's nothing wrong with individual freedom, right? But the only way to achieve true individual freedom is with true community and is with economic justice, economic equality of, not everyone making the same amount of money, but not dominated by ownership monopolistic class, right? Only in those circumstances can we have individual freedom. But I see a lot of like sort of really kind of worrying anti-progressive values trend on the anti-imperialist camp. And I think your earlier, what you said, Billy, I really like that way of looking at it, that communists are the only people that actually take liberalism seriously, right? And that we actually want to create societies where individuals have total freedom, and also all of these emancipatory make it
economic
reality, make it actually reality. Emancipation for all. Anyway.
Well, what we were saying, I mean, I think that's a great point, especially about the two different definitions of liberalism. I think even American conservatives, and something having spent several years outside of the USA, came to realize how even the most hardcore Bible thumping American conservative is both socially and economically liberal and culturally liberal than most other people in the world. And they don't even realize it. Like they talk about, we have to save, American values, American concern. You don't even realize how, compared to the average person in Eastern, more culturally liberal.
Americans conservative. In where, like the average person in where?
Well, like Russia, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, or I guess Czechia now. You compare a person who, think about a person who calls himself a conservative in America, and ask him, what are your views on gender, on marriage, on sex? And he's going to be more on most of those things, more liberal than the average person in Asia.
Really?
Or absolutely.
I don't think so. I strongly. I'm not sure. In China, gay people have always done their thing. Like nobody gives a fuck. Transgender people in China are not discriminated against. There's a superstar on TV for a long time. Transgendered trans woman.
I think even Mad Men. Like if you watch Mad Men, that's how the average American conservative sees himself. And if you look at Mad Men, with the drug use, the extramarital sex. That's more liberal. I'm talking about that. I'm not necessarily saying, I'm not saying everybody else in the world thinks gay people should be, taken out into the street and get stoned. I'm not saying that, but when it comes to cultural
Well,
values,
extramarital sex is always allowed for men. That's always everywhere. That's just patriarchy. But yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if the U.S. American conservatives are more liberal than average people in
just
Asia
by saying
or
Slavs
Russia.
is definitely. I can't speak for
Progressive.
Chinese. I cannot speak for Chinese, but Slavs is definitely true,
I-
even with men. But I want to finish my thought. But as far as oh my gosh, I'm derailed now. Let me think. Okay. Oh my gosh, this always happens to me. Okay, so I do think. Okay, crap. I forgot what the rest of my thought was going to be. Okay, Carlo, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that I think when you consider economics, the economics are and the political, a lot of conservatives are far more socialist oriented when they're pressed on it, because we have in the U.S. we have a fair measure of socialism. I remember when Obama was proposing Obamacare, or whatever you want to call it, is seeing signs that said, "Keep your hands off my Social Security," and people just weren't aware that in their minds. Now that speaks to a portion of the electorate or population that doesn't know a goddamn thing, but there's a lot of socialism here. We pay taxes, my roads get fixed, that sort of thing. It's a collective process to hire people that can fix roads to fix the roads, and we all pitch in financially, but it is a form of socialism. So it gets very. I think the question we're asking here is an extremely extreme one. Even if you were just to deal with the one culture we live in, or actually just Billy Bob and I, but that you guys are familiar with, that Ian and Leo are familiar with, it's that would be enough of a complex situation that we would get bogged down here and bogged down there. But treated internationally, I think it's way beyond our pay grade, to tell you the truth.
So
I remember
Okay,
what I was going to say. Okay, so first I want to say Carl is right, and I have in my own experiences. Some people may just in my own experiences, it's easier to get a Republican, a conservative, right? Maybe not a boomer center right conservative, but a far right or sort of far right conservative to agree with socialism than it is to get Democrats to agree with socialism. Like if you put it in, like, you can't use the C word, you can't call it communism because you'll be like, oh, communism is death camps, blah 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 blah. But if you use other words, you can get them to agree with some pretty crazy stuff. You can get them to agree with socialized healthcare, with he's like, oh, give people, give families money for having children. There's a lot of crazy stuff.
You give it a label that they know is bad.
Exactly.
Then they're
You just have to use other words. But a Democrat will never agree to that stuff because they're just so it's just so funny how people who call themselves leftists are so opposed to leftism. But I remember what I was going to say. I want to say, as far as progressive values go, it needs to and this is my sincere belief. It needs to happen voluntarily, and it needs to happen at the pace that nation of people is coming. And he's happened organically, not imposed by some external group, and he's happened voluntarily. Like recently, like I think just earlier this week, Iran lifted the hijab requirement. Right? That's the thing. No one held a gun to their heads and made them do that. That's just the thing. They naturally liberalized. I think when countries and groups of people are not under siege, when they're not feeling pressured, they naturally become more liberal. When they feel threatened by an external force, they circle the wagons and they become more conservative. And it's a natural self-preservation mechanism. So these guys, these Westerners who always talk about how, progressive values, we're actually serious about it. Well, the answer is to lift sanctions, not to put people in siege. Because when people are feeling comfortable, they say, well, you know what, we'll become more liberal. We'll loosen up a little bit. And by
Damn,
classic,
Ian, you're starting to talk like a Marxist.
well, maybe. But
I don't.
I want to bring up I know, Carlo, you're dying to talk. Let me just
No,
finish.
I just
the
want to
case.
say one. I don't entirely agree with what Ian
Okay.
just said.
Okay,
And
go ahead.
my prime example would be when it comes to federal funds. Ironically, it's the red states that get most of the federal money. They're the ones that need it the most. Now, if California produces, I mean, its GDP is like higher than most countries. I think it might be just as a state. It might be in the top 10 or the fifth highest GDP in the world, just as a state. Yet I would not say that that it would be more. It would be difficult to convince most people I know from California, which is quite a few, that that it's difficult to convince that we should have single payer medical that we should cut out the middleman the insurance industry to cut it out. I mean, any businessman that's worth his salt, and that's the way I spent part of my life, it knows that if you have if you have another person in between what you want to negotiate, what you want to buy and sell, that you've got to pay them something, and it goes up. It's more expensive to do it that way. So all its socialism is saying is, look, we're just dealing with the population and the government, and it's much more efficient that way to do it. And I doubt that I would run into a lot of opposition in that percentage-wise in a place like California or even in the DC area where I live.
So I need to push back against you, and because Dust is in the comments also agreeing with you, but I need to push back against both of you. So there is a urban, and this is true in every country on earth, every country, there is an urban and rural divide. Urban people tend to be more liberal because they're packed together, so they're more liberal on certain things. And rural people are going to be more socially conservative. This isn't true in Russia. And it's also true that rural people per capita in every country need more government spending. Because imagine if you're in Russia, you have to build a gas line. Obviously, of course, Moscow, of course, any city is going to have gas. And it's cheap to give 1 million people all in one place gas lines. But if you say, hey, we want to give this village of 100 or 200 people a gas line, obviously per capita, per individual person, that's way more money than it would be in a city. So it's just true that is for when you have a federal government, a federal system like Russia or the USA, per capita, those rural people are going to need more support from the central government than a person in the city. And it's just the nature. Yeah, but also they're the people growing your foods too, so you can't shit on the and you know the thing is you have to. I understand rural people can be frustrating to deal with, and they're often very backwards in how they think. Like you say, well, maybe women don't need to wear burqas. I mean, even in Afghanistan, Afghanistan is my favorite example of ramp. If you go to Kabul, you go to the city and say, well, women don't need to wear burqas. Of course, most people will probably agree with you. But you go out into the mountains, go out into a rural village and say, well, I think women don't need to wear burqas. They're going like, whoa. That's against Islam. That's ungodly. It's terrible idea. So you're going.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. So my point is you need to be patient with them. And when you improve their standard of living, they will naturally become more liberal.
I agree with that.
But every state has its metropolises and its rural areas. So that negates what you're saying because
how does it negate what I'm saying?
Because some states are blue and some states are red.
No, well,
the red ones need more help.
That's an example. That I mean, that there are many other factors that could account for that. But I think what it is that these conservative attitudes or bigoted attitudes are inherited from feudalism largely. They're feudal attitudes, right? They're old school, like 18th century attitudes about gender and sex and all of these things. And it's that liberalism, capitalism did move us beyond feudalism. It did institute these progressive values and move us, and the rural people are a little bit left behind. I mean, that's, I think, what accounts for this rural and urban divide to a large extent. And in keeping with what you were saying, Ian, which I absolutely agree with, I think is a very important point, that only when people are relaxed, when they are not anxious, when their cities are not being bombed, and when they have food on the table, can they relax and let go of their cherished or their feudal attitudes, leftover
prejudices, biases, ignorance. Yeah,
I do think
religion as well.
I do think some of the people here in the chat could benefit from watching some Stalin era movies. I'm not even joking. Like if you look at Soviet movies from, I would say the Stalinist era, like 1930s through the 1950s. Like you can see, I mean, because there is a propaganda element to all of those movies. They're aimed at the lowest educated people in the Soviet Union at the time. And they don't talk to you like you're stupid or you're bad for believing these things. They just try to educate you. I mean, first thing they did is the liquidation of illiteracy. They said, every person in the Soviet Union is going to know how to read, at least be able, maybe not be able to read Tolstoy, but at least be able to read, the back of a soup can. We're going to teach everybody, no matter who he is, a basic level of literacy. Yeah. And they had all these movies, because to the Bolsheviks and to the Soviet communists, they considered movies a very important tool of propaganda, of information sharing to everybody.
So does the
and the way they tell people this, they talk about, like I saw this one Soviet movie. It was a war movie, and it had this like 10-minute scene about blood transfusions. And they were just like, you don't have to be scared, because, to a very rural person who's never seen any kind of medical technology before, a blood transfusion sounds very scary. Like, what is this? And they were just dispelling all of the myths of blood transfusions. Like, you don't have to be scared that you will turn into the person you're taking blood from, because that was a common belief back then. If you take blood from somebody, you will turn into that person. Like, if you take blood from a grumpy old man, you won't turn into a grumpy old man. If you take blood from a silly laughing girl, you won't turn into a laughing girl. And so I really like how they approach it. Like, they don't patronize people. They don't tell people they're stupid or bad for believing these things. They just say, here's the truth, and that was their approach to all things technology and society, to marriage, kitchen slavery. That's how they approached all of these topics, just educating people without prejudice.
Yeah, that's awesome. But I can hear the liberals say, but Stalin rolled back the progressive, policies of the previous era. I would say out of necessity, out of national unity, and the previous era was moving a little bit too fast before the material conditions can catch up, can allow people to accept these very progressive values. I mean, Russia was still very poor and very desperate to develop, and so for national unity and the Cold War, I mean, it was entering a new era of heightened tensions and anxiety. And so I think, the rolling back of some of the more progressive policies of the previous era was out of necessity. Anyway.
Yeah, and he didn't do things, a lot of times everything he did is because he was a brutal, ignorant, evil dictator. And when you really look at, what was going on, and there's always a good explanation about why he changed policies or whatever. Like, they were repressive of the Orthodox Church. And then when the war started, they really relaxed those repressions. And it made sense. I I wanted to get back to the liberalism. You guys have rightly pointed out that, I go back and forth, right? So there's the big L liberalism, which is, it's the whole movement that ended feudalism. And it really, to me, the core of big L liberalism is individual rights. And it's because, the wealthy elites did not want a government impinging on their individual rights to profit and to build corporations and to exploit labor. Like, these were their individual rights. And so the main thing about big L liberalism is the the embrace of individual rights. And at the same time, it's in opposition to collectivism. It's in opposition to the way of thinking about the whole group and what is in the interest of the whole group. And you can't do that. You can't worry about what is in the best interest of the whole group, because you might violate somebody's individual rights. So it's the sanctity of individual rights and the rejection of a collective approach. So it's anti-socialist. So liberalism is anti-socialist, and it's really the ideology of the wealthy bourgeoisie, because again, it's, they have these rights, they have these privileges that they don't want to be threatened by the collective, organizing and coming together and harming their individual interests to be wealthy and have this privilege within society. So, so that's the big L liberalism, and everybody in the United States, whether you're a Christian conservative, whether you're a latte sipping, Prius driving, Democratic voting, green haired liberal, you are under this big L liberal. You oppose socialism. You oppose looking at society through how can we benefit, the entire society, and you embrace this idea that the sanctity of individual rights. And so but there's this other little L liberalism, cultural liberalism, which is kind of defined in its opposition to cultural conservatives. So conservatives want to conserve ideas of gender norms, family values, religion, whereas little L liberals want progress, and we want to be inclusive, we want to be tolerant, we want to promote identity politics and celebrate everybody's individual identity. So it is complicated. Reality is complicated, and so it's good that you guys accuse me of going back and forth when I talk about liberalism, jumping from one kind of liberalism to the other. But both exist and both are important. And I think we have to have these conversations to understand and bring out the complexity of reality, and it's so important. Carlos giving me this look like, "Shut up, Billy Bob, you're stupid."
Can I just add to that? Just want to make one quick small thing. Just on a philosophical point, to view individual freedom and the collectivity as dichotomy, as opposed to each other, is false. They are absolutely entwined. If we look at human society, we are a species that cooperates, that takes care of each other, that and the two are absolutely, they depend on each other. They have a mutually dependent relationship rather than opposition. Anyway, go on.
No, I'm sorry, Leo. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to read Stalin. I'm going to give everybody their daily reading of Stalin right now to further your point, and then it's Carlo's turn.
Oh yeah,
Carlo, you're going to have to listen to Stalin. Okay, there is no, nor should there be, irreconcilable contrast between the individual and the collective, between the interests of the individual person and the interests of the collective. There should be no such contrast, because collectivism, socialism, does not deny but combines individual interests with the interests of the collective. Socialism cannot abstract itself from individual interests. Socialist society alone can most fully satisfy these personal interests. More than that, socialist society alone can firmly safeguard the interests of the individual. In this sense, there is no irreconcilable contrast between individualism and socialism. But can we deny the contrast between classes, between the propertied class, the capitalist class, and the toiling class, the proletarian class? On the one hand, we have the property class, which owns the banks, the factories, the mines, transport, the plantations and colonies. These people see nothing but their own interests. They're striving after profits. They do not submit to the will of the collective. They strive to subordinate every collective to their will. On the other hand, we have the class we have the class of the poor, the exploited class, which owns neither factories nor works nor banks, which is compelled to live by selling its labor power to the capitalist, which lacks the opportunity to satisfy its most elementary requirements. How can such opposite interests and strivings be reconciled? As far as I know, Roosevelt has not succeeded in finding the path of conciliation between these interests, and it is impossible, as experience has shown. Incidentally, you know the situation. He's talking to H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells was interviewing him in 1934, and he's telling Wells, incidentally, you know the situation in the United States better than I do, as I have never been there, and I watch American affairs mainly from literature. But I have some experience in fighting for socialism, and this experience tells me that as Roosevelt makes a real attempt to satisfy the interests of the proletarian class at the expense of the capitalist class, the latter will put another president in his place. The capitalist will say, presidents come and presidents go, but we go on forever. If this or that president does not protect our interests, we shall find another president. What can this president oppose to the will of the capitalist class? So, sorry I had to do that to you guys. It's Carlo's turn.
But that's what he's talking about. If he went to impose socialism in some form, that the landed, the property class would not allow it. The wealthy wouldn't allow it. So, Roosevelt went and convinced those people, if you don't do it, you're going to end up with communism in the United States because people are hurting. I wanted to say one thing about what you said before, though, and that was, what you said was true about socialism, people don't want socialism. Why, when they poll people, 72%, 76%, they want a form of socialism. They would prefer a form of socialism in this country. Is that for
Ian?
In the U.S.
Is that a question for Ian?
No, for you.
Well, I said people don't want socialism.
Yeah, you said. Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah, basically.
I mean, no. I think.
You said if you ask liberals, if you ask liberals whether or not they would want socialism, they would take Bernie Sanders and tar and feather him for going out in the. Now we know Bernie's just hot air right now, but they would tar and feather the guy for bringing it up. They don't do that.
Well, I think Ian was saying earlier that it's easier for conservatives or U.S. conservatives to accept socialism by another name than liberals to accept. That's what Ian was saying, I think.
What?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'll ask people who call themselves. I ask people from the coastlines of America or in Europe.
Yeah.
These people call themselves leftists or even ultra leftists, and they say, "Okay, what country that has had a successful leftist revolution anywhere do you actually like?" And they will literally say none of them. It's like none of them. So not a single one, not a single actual leftist country.
Was just
those are not ultra leftists.
Denouncing Venezuela as a dictatorship and Cuba as a dictatorship, and so he's a supposed socialist, but he's a liberal, and liberals are always in opposition to socialists. Now, I think most people that identify as liberals are ignorant, and they can be won over, right? Because they're confused, they're ignorant, and they don't know any better.
I don't know, because they love the USA too much. I mean, you can't. I mean, have you ever gotten a liberal to say Cuba is an okay place in your life?
Yes.
Well,
I see you thinking.
No. Actually, Bernie Sanders said precisely that once, and he was attacked from all sides and deplatformed immediately. That I think played probably a big part in his losing the nomination in the Democratic Party. But what he said was that not everything in Cuba is terrible.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the interesting thing about Cuba, I don't think most, I think Cuba's kind of interesting because I have to caveat this. I have not been to Cuba. I just speak to people who've been to Cuba. So it seems like with the USA, the only Americans who've been to Cuba are Hispanic people. It's actually kind of like even these super right-wing Republican guys, but they're Latino. They'll go to Cuba, and speak Spanish, because to them, which makes sense to a Latino person, Cuba isn't like hell on earth. They're just like, I'm this Latino person in America. I'll just go to Cuba for a vacation or whatever. I'll buy their cigars. I'll speak Spanish because I'm a native Spanish speaker. But if you ask a white liberal in America or a white conservative, oh, it's hell on earth. But Latinos in America are the only people who go to Cuba. But in Russia, like everybody, Cuba is like a vacation place. There's even red-eye flights to Cuba. It's just a cheap place. It's kind of far, but still, a place people from here can go for vacation. So it's kind of interesting to see that, because a Russian will go to Cuba and say, okay, it's not obviously it's not a high-income country, but they understand, it's like it's an okay country. It's a normal country, good people. And in America, it's kind of the opposite thing. They think Cuba is like this horrible, evil dictatorship, and the only people who have a different opinion are the Latinos who go there on vacation. Because they're Latinos, they're just like, oh, it's just a normal country you go to on vacation. But with white liberals, you can never get them to see that because they don't see the rest of the world as normal. They see it as like a Hollywood.
There's a distinction between the ideology of liberalism and the purpose and the function that the ideology of liberalism serves for imperialism. There's a distinction between that and what any individual self-identified liberal believes or thinks. And so I think that the ideology serves the function of keeping people away from embracing collectivism by its promotion of individual rights. But I think I think individual liberals can be won over to socialism by explaining that by explaining reality really. And so that's kind of the distinction. So when I talk about liberals not wanting socialism, Carlo, I mean, I kind of mean that in this is the function that the ideology of liberalism serves as a counterweight to avoid socialism and to maintain the current property relations, maintain the current power relations where the ruling class is the ownership class, and that's the fundamental difference between socialism and liberalism. Liberalism is just basically oligarchy where the ownership class is the ruling class, and then socialism is when the working class is the ruling class. And so
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
that is the deciding factor. Lenin famously said once, how to tell a revolutionary movement from a non-revolutionary movement. The question of property, or at least I think he said that. I may have imagined that, but it may have been something else. But that is absolutely true.
It's accurate.
It's absolutely accurate. It's a question of property relations.
I don't think generalizing like this is very productive. I mean, I'll give you.
What do you mean generalizing?
You probably don't want to talk about our boy Rockhill, but
I want to talk about Gabriel Rockhill.
We like Rockhill. Carlo has venom for Rockhill for some strange reason. It is so bad.
Jackson Pollock and the other abstract surrealists. Many of them, even though they were supported by the Congress for Cultural Freedom, most of them knew nothing about it. They were.
No one's saying that abstract expressionism is all shit. I mean, the artistic value is objective.
I mean, talk about Pollock or Rothko. But what I want to say is that they were avowed. Many of them were avowed communists, including Pollock, who marched with communist groups up until his end, his untimely death in an automobile accident.
That doesn't contradict.
What that has to do with Rockhill, but that's fine.
But that doesn't contradict.
Well,
that does not contradict.
Because Rockhill implies that anybody that got money from the Congress of Cultural Freedom or Farfield Foundation or Rockefeller Foundation, that their art has been tainted by that.
No. You're reading it on a very no.
No, I'll tell you why.
No. Carlo, listen. The individual merit of much of the work of people who have been funded by the Congress of Cultural Freedom is not dismissed by Rockhill, nor I think Billy Bob.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not dismissing the philosophical merits of Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault did tremendous work on the evolution of institutional power in Europe, right? Like all of those people, the Frankfurt School, did some great work in terms of cultural analysis. No one is dismissing all of their work, but
No.
there is an overall agenda to shape the Western intellectual discourse over a period of the Cold War to be against to move them towards opposition to the Soviet Union and to totalitarianism and to authoritarianism, these fictional nonsense concepts.
Yeah.
I disagree on 2 points, and then I'll connect what I'm saying.
Okay.
Is first of all,
Okay, guys.
Rock Hill does not praise any of those people in any
No,
of
he
his
doesn't
work I've
praise
read.
them, but I don't think he dismisses, that they have some objective merit.
It's
doesn't
very
speak to that
close
at
to
all.
dismissal. And the second point I want to make is everybody that I've read him with, I guess I'll have to make the exception of you and Leo and Billy Bob. Everyone I've said that I've contacted or been in discussion with, they automatically hate they hate the work that Rock Hill points out as being funded. It's the funding takes over, and they have a predisposition to dislike those artworks. And many of them don't even know who those people are. So
What?
my third point is going out of my head. I was going to tie the two together, but that's what the result is. The result is to belittle what some of the greatest artwork is.
No,
It's
that's
never
false. No, that is false. That is false. Period.
Well,
That's not
Rock
the
Hill
result.
better do a better job then of what he's doing.
No,
because
you
that's the
should do a
impression
better job of
everybody's getting
interpreting.
from
You
his
should stop
reading,
misinterpreting.
except for
You should
you
stop
guys.
misinterpreting. You should stop misinterpreting what he said, what his work is
I'm
about.
not misinterpreting
That is a
anything.
false. You are, and
No,
all
I'm
your
not.
friends are, and all of your friends are. No one is dismissing. No one is belittling.
I don't know if
the
you're
abstract
interested. You have to go.
But look, if he had any kind of admiration for him, it doesn't appear in his work.
It doesn't. He
No,
doesn't
That's
have
not
to.
the point. That's
That's
not his
not the point. He doesn't
He's
have
not
to
talking about
admire
the merits of their artistic expression. That has nothing to do with anything Rock Hill's saying. Period.
Nothing.
Well, then he's only telling half the story.
Okay. Well, he's not focusing on everything. Well, you got to focus on everything. You can't just focus on something. It's got to be everything.
He needs to tell that half of the story because the merit of Jackson Pollock is lauded by the fucking MoMA, is by the Modern Art Museum. No one needs to tell that side of the story. Do you understand?
That's being already being told. Yeah.
No, you don't. Yes, you do
He's
have
saying
to tell.
what other people aren't
No,
saying.
you don't.
He especially has
like
to tell
fucking
it.
1984
He
is required
especially has to tell
curriculum.
it because
George
he's writing
Orwell.
what he's writing.
George Orwell.
Hey, let's thank Ian for joining us. Thank you, Ian. I know you got to run, but we're probably going to continue for a little while. I'm kind of interested in, but I know you got to run.
Sorry. Dinner's ready, so I got to go. It's been 2 hours, but it's been great.
We'll see you Friday or next week.
We'll see you then. Take care.
Bye, Ian.
Well, yeah, I kind of just avoid talking with Carlo about Rock Hill because to me, it he's got a lot of venom and it doesn't. I don't get it. I don't think you're understanding. So you're really misinterpreting.
He has not shown any sensitivity toward the art itself. None.
He doesn't need to. He's not an artist. He's not an art critic.
But if he's going to write a book about it's coming into being and it's being influenced or tainted by government money, he should point out his position.
But let me say this. We have another friend of the show. He hasn't been on for a while, but John Stepling is another real big critic of Rock Hill. He hates Rock Hill, and part of the reason I was talking to John about it. And I mean, he's just really a big Adorno fan, and he just really finds Adorno to be extremely insightful and was been very influential on Stepling's own intellectual development. And so he kind of is really triggered by Rock Hill as well, and he doesn't like how Rock Hill is dismissive of their work really. And so I can kind of appreciate that. Like if if you really think highly of one of these artists, that Rock Hill just kind of lumps together and says, all these people were part of this, this bourgeois effort to shift cultural perspectives and to make the left more compatible with imperialism, you might not be open to that view if you really, identify and appreciate the work of some of these people. But I just think that's a misunderstanding of what Rock Hill's about, what his main point is. Like, it's just so obvious that he's not about saying these people shouldn't be listened to or they don't have anything good to say. But he is true that they do kind of promote this anything except socialism. And for the most part, most of them oppose actually existing socialism. And they turned into, it's kind of a nihilism, because it says, well, capitalism is awful, but it's socialism is worse. And so it's a hopeless situation. And they delve into how hopeless everything is. And they don't have solutions. And I think there are solutions. I think socialism is the solution. And I think there's, we should not shit on actual existing socialism. But Rock Hill is not, denouncing these people or saying that there's no value or merit in their work or that their work should be rejected. He's saying there's reasons why they're platformed. There's reasons why they're studied in universities and other people aren't. Like Lasordo, right? You don't have Lasordo classes, but you have Adorno classes. And there's a reason for that. Yeah. So, hey, it's 2 hours and 15 minutes. Great discussion. Comrades, Comrade Carlo, Comrade Leo.
Yeah. Until next time.
I'm not getting we're not getting a fist from Comrade Carlo, but that's okay.
Carlo, I love Jackson Pollock, bro.
Me too.
Yeah, no, I love like a lot of those artists. I like Michel Foucault. I think he did great work.
Absolutely, yes.
Anyway.
I worked at Amtrak on Font Plaza, close to the museum. What museum it was? And they have a beautiful Pollock, almost 25 feet long.
Yeah.
And I used to take my lunch break and sit on the bench in front of it and just stare at it for my entire lunch break.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant.
Totally psychedelic. Anyway, until next time.
All right.
All right, guys. We will see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.